makes me want to cry a little bit now, but it's still to this day I'm trying to figure it out. It's like I finally have the money and I have the things to hire people to tell me like what was wrong, but sorry.
What's up, guys? Malcolm McCaskey here. Time to breathe. Man, this is a fresh breath coming in right now. Someone who's become one of my closest friends, amazing dad, one of the most technically advanced riders on a dirt bike that I've seen in a long time. He's got a crazy history, crazy story. He's got the MX factory. He's traveling all around the US, spreading his love for motorsports, teaching people how to ride. My hometown now, Austin, Texas. My boy, Tyler Livesay. What's up, baby?
It's super awesome to be on with you, man. I know we get to see each other often in person, but just being on here and kind of supporting the movement of you building this deal and spreading the positivity and the love that you spread to people. I've even said it to you. I'm like, man, you're meant for this, right? Because you're such a positive person, making people feel good. So I'm glad you're getting to do it for a passion and work or whatever you want to call this. I don't even know. What do you call this? Is this passion? Is this work?
I mean, I'm so new to this. I'm so new to this game. I don't even know. I'm just having fun with it. But part of it is the joy. I love helping people. I see so much value in people. And with you coming out here, I mean, we're not in downtown Austin. We're like 45 minutes from downtown Austin, rolling green hills, this and that. And we had connected a long time ago via DM, and you had hit me up about mended in gear and stuff. But I just feel really grateful that I ended up out here. I love it with my family, my daughter. You've got your boy Lincoln, who's now ripping. I've seen him out there on that gas catching some air. But I feel just super grateful, like getting to know you and watching who you are and what you're doing. So as much as you said the complimentary words, it's like I feel humbled on the friendship, but I'm like, man, we got to tell some more of this guy's story because I keep learning more and more as your friend and a close friend. So I felt like, man, time to breathe. We gotta bring Tyler on this thing ASAP.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's been like my life has been like such a wild ride, dude. When I sit down and take the time to think about it, I'm like, man, is everyone else's like this? Like I wonder if everyone else's is like this, because if so, love to everyone, because um it's just been one of those things where I never knew what was next, and I think that's life in general, but it was always real dramatic. I was just telling a friend the other day, it's like, I feel like God teaches me things with aggression sometimes, right? And I think my whole life has been one of those things. Like it takes me a little while to adapt and learn, and I'm trying to evolve to the point where like I don't need it to be so dramatic to learn and to grow. And that's something that I've been working on a little bit. But yeah, man, it's been fun, and I'm proud of where I'm at, and I'm proud of what we've built, and I'm proud of what we've done for people inside the sport that a lot like yourself, I feel like made me in a sense. It taught me a lot of things that I wouldn't have known otherwise, or I would have maybe learned them in a more harsh environment than I did. So yeah, I mean, it's been cool.
Well, selfishly, I want to know more, even though we hang out in person. And I know to me, what I see right now is pretty much one of the most positive guys out there. You're always helping people, whether it's in your friends in the area, myself. I mean, whether it's bikes, dirt bikes, getting connected, getting me back in the sport, let me ride your bike. I always look up to you as a dad and watching you continue to grind and grow there. I want to jump into all that and the MX factory. I don't even realize how big it is. And then we go to Supercrosses and I just see everyone coming up, showing how much you've opened new doors for people that didn't know about riding, didn't know how to ride, don't know who Jet Lawrence is, and you're selling out like 35, you know, 35 person schools all around the US, and it's not in any weird selling way. You're literally going there and providing technique. As much as I want to get into that, I selfishly want to go back to your roots, dude. I gotta like get more of like where you're from and just like how this whole thing started. Because I mean, it's like I said, you have such an insane perspective on life, and I see you putting that now. But I need to go back to the roots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So back to the roots. I grew up in the Southeast, like Georgia, Florida, Tennessee. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. And I think that put a little bit of the soul in me, right? A little Southern soul. When you're born in Atlanta, you can't help but get a little bit of that rub off on you. At 4 years old, we moved to Tennessee. By we, I mean my dad, my grandparent. We moved in with my grandparents, which was a blessing. My grandpa was a World War II vet. My grandma worked at J.C. Penney's for like 100 years or something. You know, she retired from there after whatever 30, 40 years of working there. So just kind of like the traditional, hey, I'm gonna work, and you know, I've got the husband that's a wild World War II vet. You know, he was awesome to me, but I think he went through phases in his life that were pretty gnarly. So we all lived together in Tennessee. My dad always was trying to get me into riding, and in fact, I have a pretty funny story, and you'll appreciate this because I was on a I think it was 1976 Honda Z50. I think it was a Z50 back then. And my dad had bought this thing, and I always remember walking by it and it being like a foot taller than me. Right, I was probably 3 years old at the time, and he would want me to get on it, and I was like, no, dude, not a chance. I was really scared of it, you know. And one day he got me to ride on this thing, and I had his street bike helmet on, which was like I could have fit my head and your head in that thing. And you know, it's bobbling around down in my eyes, and we lived up on this big tall hill. It felt like a mountain, and you know, we lived in the mountains, but it was just this really steep, long, tall hill. He goes down to the bottom of it, and granted, my dad wasn't like, Valentino Rossi or anything. And so we're on the street, and he's bombing around the Z50. He comes around this right hand corner and washes the front end out on the street with me, 3 years old. Right, my helmet flies off. Okay, I remember this. Helmet leaves my body, and then him kind of bear hugging me, and us just rumbling. And then I remember the sound so vividly of my helmet smacking up against the dumpster. Boom! My helmet hits the dumpster, and I'm like, never, scared the life out of me, right? And of course, my dad was probably like, okay, this is it. He's never going to ride one of these things again. And I didn't for a really long time, dude. I didn't get back on a bike. I was talking to my dad the other day trying to piece the timelines together because, I got my little guy now that's starting to ride at 5. I was like, was I riding at 5? He's like, oh, no. He's like, from that crash all the way until you're about 7 years old, you wouldn't even look at a dirt bike. He's like, you were like, these things are the devil, right? They're moving machine devils. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So Lincoln's a little further along than I was. But when I turned 7, around that time, it was Christmas. He got me another bike and went out and rode it in a soccer field, a lot like I've been taking Lincoln out in your neighborhood in that soccer field. So when I'm out there, I sometimes get a little emotional, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is where I learned. My son's out here learning and enjoying it. My first moment on a dirt bike of feeling enjoyment was on a soccer field, just cruising around on the soccer field like, oh, I got this. I'm not going to die out here, and moving through that, kind of got into riding a little bit. We moved down to Florida when my grandparents officially retired. We moved down to Florida on a golf course with them, and I kind of got into golfing, was pretty decent at golfing, and my grandpa was always pissed off at my dad because I was good at golfing, and my grandpa was a big golfer. He's like, he could be so good, he could go to college, he could make a living, all these things. He was always putting me in tournaments and things like that. And my dad was like, oh, well, my dad was just kind of like a good old boy redneck, wanted to go racing kind of thing. So, and naturally as a kid, you choose the more adventurous avenue typically. You know what I mean? And I chose motocross because of that. I'm like, it's a little more fun. It's a little more adventure. Golf is boring for, a 9, 10-year-old. And then moving through that, I kind of chose motocross. My grandmother died. I think I was 9, going on 10 years old. That was a big deal for my grandpa. One of those love stories where grandma dies and grandpa just kind of gives up, He's like, I don't, you could just sense that it's like, nothing's ever going to be the same. I'm not really, they were together for 50 years or so. I don't want to be here anymore type of thing. And, it wasn't a year and a half, 2 years later, he had passed away, just got sick. There was no rhyme or reason, just got sick and passed away. And then after that, my life kind of got a little wild because I think that they were both for my dad and myself, that they were the rock, they were the stability, they were the fallback. They were what took care of me when my dad was busy doing whatever he was doing at the time, good or bad. And I think that all that pressure on my dad, like, okay, now I've got to take care of this guy full time. And I don't want to skip away from my mom. She was in the picture, but I never really lived with her. And, I'd visit her on holidays, and she was doing the best she could too. So I'd see her occasionally, but, the full-time project was me and my dad. So I think pressure got to him, making money, going racing, doing all these things. But one thing that brought us together every single weekend was we would go racing. That was the thing that, like, maybe we would have rough times during the week or whatever. We lived in a pretty ghetto area. If I could use a better term, I would, but it was just not a great place. And so there was a lot of options for drugs and alcohol and crime and just kind of being in that fear state all the time as a young kid. I was a real mellow kid, right? real quiet, real mellow. I didn't want to break the rules. I didn't want to get in trouble. I think a lot of this was stemming from how my grandparents raised me. And then to be in this environment where you look around everywhere you look, it's like, oh, there's a shooting over there. There's, drugs over here. There's someone getting robbed over there. Or did you hear what happened at the 7-Eleven last week? And as an 11, 12, 13-year-old kid, that's a lot. It kind of puts you in that like chaotic state. And when I go back and I think about these things, I think about even me as an adult, and I think it's important for people to hear out there, is that you got to go back and think about your childhood and what you created comfort in and how you created comfort. Because sometimes now in my adult life, I'll create the chaos to feel comfort subconsciously, right? I'll make decisions that are going to create chaos in my life, so I'm comfortable there. And I think that that's why I fell in love with motocross so much, because it was, once you start riding, it's controlled chaos the whole time. And so,
Yeah.
when I'm starting to relate my life back into like where my career evolved to and what I like to do, even as fun nowadays, it's like I still like that. I still like to be in that environment, but I'm trying to um, know when I'm choosing it for what reason. And so, moving back through the teenage years, it was a bit of a rough ride. We did a lot of racing. I got pretty decent, and top five, some nationals. Nothing crazy. I wasn't beating Dungy and Villapoto and these guys. They were a notch ahead of me, but I wasn't far behind. And at 16, I moved out. I moved out on my own at 16. A lot of details there that are kind of wild details, and the decisions were based off of my environment and feeling like that I could probably do better on my own. I remember moving into one of my buddy's house, just temporary, like, hey, you're on your own. Come over here and stay. Jake Donnelly and Dean Driggers. Dean Driggers took me to get my driver's license, and he's like, if you're gonna live here, you got to be able to drive and help me around the ranch and do this stuff. So he took me to get my driver's license in an F-250, which I drive now, ironically, but I failed it because I couldn't park the big thing. I never driven anything like that. We were always driving like little truck, little cheap things, right? That were small, and I failed it. And Dean got all pissed off and went in there and basically yelled at the lady and said, "There's no way that he could even put his truck in that small parking spot," and made her go outside and watch him hit the cone too. And anyways, we went home and got a smaller car and came back and I passed it. But the point of that is that people were open arms because I was, and I don't, if I'm running on, you can cut me off if you got questions, but I'm gonna give you a small snippet of the timeline here. Um, the moral of the story is that I was moving out at a young age. I quit school, but people could see that I was trying to do it to better myself, not because I was in trouble or I was trying to create a worse environment for myself or a worse environment for people around me. I think even a lot of the adults that kind of took me in could see that in my character at the time, which is why they did, right? I was like going to the gym, like I didn't know much at the time, right? You don't know much at 16. When you look back, you're like, I didn't know much, but I knew that like exercising made me feel good. I knew that riding was off the table because I couldn't afford it. And I knew that I needed to figure out how to make money, right? So that's really all I did was got a job at a gym so I could exercise, right? Lived above the gym after I'd moved out from Jake and those guys, and just ran this gym as a 16-year-old kid. It was just a 24-hour gym, so there wasn't much to it. Just keep an eye on things, clean up the weights when people walk away, wipe down the equipment, whatever, sit in the office and look like you belong. And I did that for a couple of years and really loved that whole journey. Really, I enjoyed that. Looking back, I'm like, man, that was some fun times working in that gym. Like kind of learning something new. And then I got a call to start racing again from Randy Yoho in Dade City, Florida. He owns that track down there, and kind of got back into the game a little bit and spent a lot of my riding, my latter part of my riding career racing in Florida at that track. We could make 30, 40, $50,000 a year racing locally, which was a lot of money to me at the time, coming from making, basically just working for free to live in that gym and making a couple $100 here and there for food. And so that kind of got me back in the game of training and riding and understanding how to ride, which was an important piece. Randy made me go through his 3-month school in order to ride his bike in the series. And in the 3-month school, we're not allowed to go jump, just flat ground drill work, which ironically is how I teach my classes now. It's like that 3 months taught me how we actually learn on the motorcycle. And it was very important for me to go through that because I think that it just it just brought the perspective that we can't learn fast really in anything, especially dangerous things. And so that's how I try to structure my whole business around that initial model. Like it's a lot of the techniques are different, but that initial model is what inspired me to teach people the way that I do. And I think that's a big piece of the success we've had is kind of taking it slow and making sure people understand the steps and things like that. So moving through, raced a handful of years and moved out to Texas. And then moved out to Texas to help run a track called Cycle Ranch down in San Antonio, Texas. And I was running some training out of there as well. And a lot of things happen. There's some crazy stories, like, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, but I'm going to give you the gist of the story without saying names. Track owner and I weren't seeing eye to eye necessarily on things because I was starting to make some decent money and bring in some riders in. I didn't really love the cut, the percentages, or the money that was being divvied out, right? As most people don't. Now that I've owned a business and employed people, I understand his perspective a little bit more now because I never thought about all the other costs and all the other things. I'm like, well, I'm making this much money for you, and I'm only getting this little piece of the pie. It didn't make a whole lot of sense for me at the time, but now I understand. And we've had our conversations, but neither here nor there. At the time, I kind of got a little bitter. I had booked a race in Brazil, and I go to Brazil, and I come back, and there's a new coach there at the track in San Antonio, and I'm like, oh dang, okay, well that sucks. I didn't see that coming. And I had a camp booked like a couple days later. And, my ego at that time was much larger than it is now. Right? You can imagine a pro level rider, young kid. You've been around it forever. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like immediately when I see this man and I hear he's the coach, he's my enemy. You know what I mean? Like you're my enemy. I'm gonna try to crush you in any way I possibly can and get you out of here, right? And he was basically forced to coach this camp with me. And just at the riders meeting, he was a funny guy. Like I wanted to dislike him a lot, but he was like just a funny guy, fun to be around. He was cutting it up with everyone, doing a good job, and I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty cool, right? To make a long story short, me and him become like best friends, and I think that's how God works, right? First you're my enemy, and then no, this is your guy, right? This is your guy. We're gonna put you. He's put in your life for a reason. His name's Jason Doyle. He's a great guy. We're still friends to this day, and we kind of got to talking, and we kind of understood. He didn't know. He thought he was just coming there to coach, but then we kind of got to talking, like, oh, I was here to kind of get you in shape, to make you feel as if you're replaceable, right? So we kind of whatever. We end up living in this garage together. I'm talking like someone's 2-car garage off of their house, where we had beds on each side of. I have to send you guys a picture so you can put it in here. And we're living in this garage together, kind of like trying to understand all this. And fast forward a few months of us, being there working together, we're like, well, why don't we just start something ourselves? Why don't we just start our own coaching business? Right. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We went up in the tower at Cycle Ranch and we were coming up with names for our coaching business. Right. And at the time, I know who Sebastian Tortelli is. He was doing a pretty good job with coaching, was kind of popular, and his name to his business was the Champ Factory. And I'm like, dude, that is such a sick name. Like anytime you attach factory to anything, especially in our sport where it's like, oh, this is sweet. I'm like, well, what about the MX Factory? And Jason immediately is like, oh, that's it. Right. And so that's how the MX Factory started. And that was late 2011, early 2012. And we eventually moved to Austin together and started the business. And he's the one that started our YouTube channel. And, that kind of evolved our whole business. The first video you can find on our YouTube channel was a how to wheelie video, which was the first video that he had ever edited in his whole life. Right? He didn't even have a computer to do this stuff on. We had to kind of go out and get all this and figure it out. And that's kind of to make a really there's so many little details in there that are pretty fun conversations, but to make a really broad story, short enough to be here, that's it. And that's kind of how the MX Factory got started and how I got to that point with my life, I guess.
I mean, I don't know if I just dropped the mic right now because you just went in. You went in. Here's the cool thing is there's so much stuff in between there, and you did a good job of summarizing everything. Like for me, for me, knowing you as a friend too, but to departmentalize all that is your grandma and grandpa, respect for his service, and obviously respect to her dedication to J.C. Penney's for 40
Yeah,
plus
baby.
years or whatever you said. I mean, that's pretty emotional right there. My grandma was that to Mary Kay. She had a pink Cadillac and whatnot back in the day.
There we
But
go.
but your grandma and grandpa, obviously, your dad, obviously, redneck, just motorsports, loving motorsports. They were all there. Mom at this point, not as much on the daily, it sounded like, or as you were living mainly with them. How emotional was that? You talked about like, at a young age, were you like 9 or 10? You said, but
When I
but
lost
but
my
then but
grandma,
then, when you lost your grandma, and then of course it's so hard. Like I just want to, like you said, it's like egos in life and sports and everything. But going back, that was a pretty, hearing this whole kind of window leading to 2012 and the MX Factory. But losing your grandma with a relationship like you guys had, and then watching even the love for your grandpa who served and was that vet and that was there, and then it's interesting to hear that his illness or whatever kind of went away, that slowly kind of took over, and eventually he went to heaven. But it's like, man, they were together forever and they were that rock for you. So at 10 years old, I can only imagine the impact and how that affected, you, and like how you adjust at 10 years old. That's a young age, especially, my grandma meant the world to me. She just passed at like 90, 94, 95 years old. But my grandpa passed when I was about the same age. And he called me buddy. And, his name was Pop Pop. Well, Ty Williams, but we called him
yeah.
Pop Pop. I guess knowing you and knowing all the things we pushed through though, like was that a pretty, how did you work with the loss at that age, and like, was it hard to move forward, or was it just, how did you find comfort in moving
No,
forward?
dude. Here's the thing. Like my life was so chaotic as a youngster that, and now like being a parent, it's like it's a little bit heartbreaking to think about this. But I kind of had a bit of a. I didn't even shed a tear. I didn't even cry. Um, because I felt like I was, you know, really up until we lived with my grandparents, which was, 4 or 5 years old. I think those years, there's so much more education nowadays for myself and yourself as far as parenting, and I think that my parents didn't do the best job of giving me a really safe environment, and I had to protect my emotions and be like really mentally. I don't want to say cold because I don't know that that's the answer, and I don't want to say strong because I don't really felt like it was strong either. But I had to brush things off and move on a lot as a real young kid, and even to this day, like I think about sometimes because when my mom passed away just a couple of years ago, and it was super emotional. But when I was a kid, I had zero emotions, and all I can really, I try to talk to my dad about this and try to understand it because I think that's like the most important piece that we can have for our kids is understanding what made us who we are, so we don't accidentally push that off on our children. When I talk to my dad about it, from what I can gather, right, is that my environment just made me hard. You know what I mean? It made me, it hardened my heart a little bit. And I was probably really just deep down sad. And I was just having a conversation about this the other day where I remember feeling sad a lot, but I didn't know that that was actually what sad was. You know what I mean? Like we don't really want to talk
Yeah.
to people, and when I talked to you like earlier, I'm like I was a quiet kid. I think a little bit of that came from like I was a sad kid, like a little bit. I didn't really understand what was going on. For portions, it wasn't all bad, and I don't want to paint this horrible picture. But I do think that my upbringing was not consistent with what someone would want with their kids. And yeah, so to like it like I almost want to be emotional about my grandparents now to like pay back, like to give them their what they deserved from me at the time. But I do remember being at the funeral and seeing everyone cry and not crying and wondering why to myself. I'm like, why can't I cry? And
Yeah.
that's pretty wild. You know what I mean? That's pretty wild. It's like, why can't I cry? It makes me want to cry a little bit now, but it's pretty. It's it was. It's still to this day. I'm trying to figure it out. It's like I finally have the money and I have the things to hire people to tell me like what was wrong, but sorry.
No, no, man. I mean, I love you as a friend. I see we're all pushing through so much, and you could just hear in your voice how much you love your grandma and your grandpa, and how big of an inspiration they were in your life. And I've gone through the same emotions where I didn't know what sad was meant to be. I mean, I went through not having dad there and my mom crying because dad wasn't going to pick me up, when there's nothing more that a kid wants to see is his dad. When it's the parents are separated when I was 2. But I think it was just I think it's interesting, like, dude, like you getting emotional now, to me, makes a lot more sense than then, because it doesn't have anything to do with love. It has to do with growth. And I think this is such an important thing. And not this is never the intention is to bring tears, but I think the love we have for the journey, and looking back in hindsight, I can imagine there's never been a point where you didn't have the utmost appreciation, respect, and love, but you had to walk through it. And I think so many kids, myself or whoever, that have grown up in rough neighborhoods, rough, maybe interesting environments. Once again, we're all grateful because they help build us, but I feel like it's so helpful because you're just in your early 30s, and it's like, and you're kind of walking through this stuff as a dad, and now you're dealing. I can only imagine these emotions are opening up, but this is a huge thing in this world today, with just becoming one with self. And how do you get to that place? And man, I know who you are, so I know you're we're all emotional people, but like, we cover it up sometimes, we band-aid it. But the reason I even went back there is because your voice lit up when you said, "Oh, my grandma and J.C. Penney's and my grandpa, he came back, and PTSD, maybe some vet, respect to anyone who served." I mean, I have such a high regards for any single human being that has served. It breaks my heart when I hear anyone talk with anything but the utmost respect, because we're on this podcast right now, Time to Breathe, because someone went out there and fought for our freedom. So, full circle back to you, is like, I think this is a big thing, because a lot of kids are growing up and trying to find that. So how do you, this obviously just struck a nerve of emotions. How do you look back? Because I think you could bring so much value to kids that are going through it, or adults that have went through it. The reflection of in hindsight. Like now, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that what we have to be careful of more now than ever is just distracting ourselves. Back then it's like maybe I distracted myself, but it wasn't negatively, like I was going out and playing outside with my friends or whatever. I think motocross became a bit of a distraction. One, I think it was like it was positive reinforcement for me because I don't want to say I was a natural at it, but I definitely picked it up faster than I think most people do. Um, and so I think my advice to people that are going through similar things like me is that, like, the only way through is through, right? Like that's you have to go through it, and just don't distract yourself. Give yourself enough time to feel the emotion, and that piece is like something I'm just now learning, and you got to think like how many relationships that I've had, both friendships and partnerships with women. I have a kid with someone that we're not together with. Like how many relationships could have potentially been a little better with a little more awareness around my emotions, whether that be letting myself be emotional so someone can be supportive of that and that can grow connection and love, right? Rather than it just because being on your own young, and you may understand this, being on your own young, you don't have a choice, or you don't really have time to be emotional. You have to survive. And I think that fight or flight mode that I've been in a lot of my life has affected a lot of things. I don't want to say completely negatively, because I'm super grateful for where I'm at. And I'm also like pretty dang proud of the relationships that I've continued to have with people over time. But I've also know that I've screwed some up from like unknowingly, like just not even knowing that I'm doing things out of or living in fight or flight or not being emotional or not considering other people's emotions. I think for me at least, if I don't allow myself to have emotions, if I don't allow myself to feel these things, then I don't care about other people's as much. And I'm
Mm.
sure you've probably experienced that as like, oh, it doesn't bother me, it shouldn't bother you. Like, man up, be tough, life's hard.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff you hear, it's like, well, there's some elements of that where there is a time and place for it. I do think so. You need to have that inside of you, but it shouldn't be the answer to everything. And I think
Well,
for
and
a lot of my life, in a lot of my relationships, that was the answer to everything. And I would credit motocross to teaching me that, but I don't think motocross taught me that. I think that just the trials and tribulations of growing up in a pretty, not super stable environment bred that into me. And I've had to, you know, learn my way out of that. And
Yeah,
thank God I have, right? Like it's one of those things where, and I'm sure you get this, it's like, thank God you went through that. So I know a lot of people that haven't gone through anything hard and their life is even more hard, right? Because you
true.
just haven't had time to learn how to do it, right? And I think that's the beautiful part about life. And when we're having hard times, which I'm subject to hard times and good times. But if you see me from the outside in, and a lot of your viewers and even a lot of my viewers, they have no idea about any of the hard times, right? Because I don't put it out there, and part of that is because I want to protect my emotions, and part of that is because teaching people how to ride a dirt bike has nothing to do with how I feel. It's, are you going to get better at riding your dirt bike? And that's my business, and I'm always riding that fine line of like, what do I want people to know about me? Do I want people to know everything? I think there's value in that because I've been through a lot. But also it's like, well, my business is the MX factory. It's not the Tyler factory. Tyler's emotions factory. And so that's one thing that I'm always trying to juggle is like, how transparent should you be to help other people, or do you just stay in your lane and try to better yourself and make sure your kids don't have the same issues that you have?
Yeah. Let's. I mean, let's. I'll try. I'll spice it up a little bit and jump into it. But I mean, the emotions of family. I like. I just saw. I mean, this last like year has been big losses in the industry, motorsports. Even just the other day, and it's just like, it's losses as family and people close to us is always heavy. But one thing that's interesting, you said it was like the unstable upbringing, but you're really dang good. It's almost like pisses me off, but you're really good at golf. You're really good at motocross. You're really good at mountain biking, and you're picking up, getting really good at hunting, at least shooting and stuff. But golf and motocross have become like the popular thing, right? McGrath always loved it. I mean, we see half the motocross guys, Adam Cianciarulo, the Lawrences, whoever. You're really good at golf, and I always forget that you started kind of young. How did that? That's two different industries, and two different like the golf tournaments versus the motocross. I mean, it's almost like supercross versus outdoors. Supercross is amazing because it's much more glamorous. You're not getting, you're not in the middle of a hurricane in horrible weather in full gear at 105 degrees. Like how much did that kind of shape you? Just kind of actually getting the blessing of golf at a young age and motocross, but then having to kind of through the grandparents and your dad and his motorsports. How did that? It shaped so many people, and it's such a community. Motocross, golf, obviously, the synergies are there. But how much of that, like, is there anything that stands out of like the impact? Looking at how popular it is now. Back then, it wasn't as popular to crossover, but you were kind of part
Mhm.
of that crossover.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, I'm like, and I appreciate you giving me kudos on it. I would call myself average, or probably not average.
Eh,
I'm a little above average on
eh,
on those things. But I do think you've heard this saying probably a million times in your life: is how you do one thing's how you do everything. And I think once you learn how to work and learn what creates success, that it's pretty easy to apply that across different spectrums. And I think that that's probably why I'm good at the things that I get interested in. I'm bad at a lot of things, right? But the things that I'm really interested in, I kind of know the process. It's like you figure out how to do it, and then you do that as much as you want to be good, you know? First figure out how, and then do the reps, and that's going to equate to how good you get. And I started golfing young. My grandpa was putting me in lessons, right? So there's the how, right? And then I golfed for a long time, and now as an adult, I'm still getting lessons. In motocross, it is the same thing. I didn't really have that many lessons, but I had some people shouting at me what to do. But I was a very visual learner too. With motocross, I could watch someone and I could emulate their style. And I thought that was like, looking back, that was kind of a blessing that I never really realized about myself. Is that visually seeing what someone's doing and being able to actually go do that is pretty huge. But I think more people should cross over and do things that they're not good at until they're good at it, because I think it just gives them confidence that they could do that in any category of life. I was
mm-hmm.
talking to Carson the other day about like what's after the MX factory. It's like, well, I'm still learning on how to build a business and manage people and and grow within and stay sane and all those things. But I think if we can master this, we can master anything that we really want to do. I think that's probably the important thing for people to hear here is like, yeah, motocross may be the thing right now for my guys that are trying to grind and race supercross. But if you can figure out to be really good at that, you just take the formula and apply it to something else. It's not rocket science, you know?
Let me jump in on that though, because as your friend, obviously both of us are always going mountain biking or doing something and just exchanging in good brotherhood conversations. But is it hard when you actually have that mindset of technique that applies to golf? I know you golfed a few weeks back with a pretty good golfer, and you golfed for so many days straight that you had blisters, I think, or you're super sore just from trying to learn this new technique. So technique,
Mm-hmm.
motocross, you are one of the top guys to me, and I've grown up with the best of them. When I watch how you apply technique, but you continue to evolve, watching people that are completely setting the new bar, like James Stewart did, like McGrath did, and now we got Jet Lawrence, we got Hayden Deegan, we got a mix of kids with certain styles, and you keep applying that into your growth. Is it frustrating or is it hard when you look at your ability to master and control the technique on golf? Let's say BMX mountain bike, motocross, and then you try to use the same mindset for life. Life does not.
It,
Life throws so many. Life throws so many different obstacles, and so
yeah.
you and I bond on this. But it's like, man, it's like, okay, technique, technique, technique. Wait, my technique is not working. I'm putting love here. I'm putting attention here. This shifted. When it rains, it pours. It's got to be like for people in life is probably the most insane supercross track, the most insane motocross track because it's not the same. It's almost like Tony Hawk video games or the motocross games, right? It's like, wait, it just shifted on me. I wasn't ready for that. How do you even relate the
Oh,
frustration or
dude.
the comparables of being able to master something or at least feeling in control and then sometimes feeling out of control with life?
Dude, I don't know anything about life. Like, that's how it feels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. And every time I think I know, I get reminded that I don't really know. And I think that's the thing about life is that, there's some baseline stuff that I think that you should strive for, which is just one, to be happy and set your environment up to be doing things that you enjoy to do and around people that you love. Like baseline. I wake up, I get to do some things that I like to do, and then I'm around people that I love and I know love me back unconditionally. And I was just talking to Becky last night about unconditional love, and I haven't felt that much in my life. Like there's always like a thing that comes along with it. Like, what do I get from you, or what do you get? What do you get from me, and like what do you expect from me, and things like that. And she was really able to kind of bring some perspective in on that. We were talking about God and faith and how I go back and forth on it. I'm like, well, hold on, like if this is this, then why do these people believe this, and why are they wrong and we're right? Like just going back and forth, and all of it is, I think, great exercise for the brain. But it all comes down to is like we're not in control. Like you can only control a small percentage of your life, and the rest of it is just like how do you approach it when it goes the way that it's supposed to go. And sometimes that's hard,
Mhm.
right? It's supposed to go hard, and how do you approach that? And I think right now, as a society, I think we're having a hard time approaching the hard with grace, and even myself included. Like I'll find myself approaching the hard with distractions. I'll find myself approaching the hard with dishonesty. Like I'll find myself approaching the hard with like just stubbornness and pretending that it's not that way. I'm definitely
Yeah.
not immune to any of that, and I don't think anyone is. I think the people that say they are, they're lying. They're
Yeah.
lying. And I don't know anything about any of this. I'm just trying to learn and trying to be a little bit happy along the way, and and trying to be good to people that are close to me and not bad to people that are close to me. I heard a quote the other day by John Cena, who obviously has had some success in his life, and it really hit with me. He said, "I'm just living every day trying to be the person that I'm telling everybody that I am." And I'm like,
Mhm.
damn, that's deep, right? Like like you tell the world that you're this person. It's like if you're not working your ass off to back that up, you ain't that person. You're lying. And
Yeah.
I think that's the phase of life I'm in, is like I'm just trying to be who I'm telling everyone that I am. And sometimes I fall short, sometimes I'm spot on. And Yeah. I mean, I know that's just a really
Yeah.
long version of saying, I don't know what the hell is going on, Malcolm. I'm just here with you.
No. Oh, hey, well, I love that you're here with me. And and man, I think this is so helpful because like the cool thing about friendship is like, and even when you do it on a platform like this or anything, is like it's being vulnerable, right? Like we're both talking through life, and even when I do my Malcolm Beans thing I've been doing in the morning or whatever, do you think there's just comfort? Is there editing? Oh, let me put on the right screen for my pimples or the scars on my face or the light, whatever. No, it's like just living and going, but that's how you create the momentum. And I think to your point about faith and everything in the search is what I've learned that has helped me the most. It's my relationship with God, but and it's my relationship with the Bible, and it's the growth I find, and that's God sharpening my sword. But that's the guardrails, because every time I've tried to do anything in this world on my own, to your point, I've literally stumbled and just went down the biggest hill just cartwheeling every single time, in business, in relationships, in life. Why? Is because there's not anything that goes back to the fruits and the root of of our of the founder of Jesus and all these sacrifices. And people ask me like, oh well, I'm mad at so and so and I can't forgive so and so or this and that. I'm like, man, Jesus Christ died on the cross, lashes and everything, to soak up all of our sins on the highest level. And I know people might be universe in certain things. Once again, I'm humble that this is my life, my belief in what's worked for me. But I'm like, but you can't not judge that guy, and then you hold that weight, and that weight holds you back from sharpening your sword and continuing to transform into who God intended. Like there's so much
Yeah.
more. You know my boy Steven, we talk every morning, and I was talking to Steven, who's obviously one of my best dudes in the world, obviously amazing dad, two twin boys. I don't know why I always say two twin. If you have twins, there's two, but twin boys.
Yeah.
But and
You got two twins?
yeah, he said, "You got four, bro? You got four?" Like I said, I'm not a mathematician. I can't even add. But this morning when we were talking, I said, "Man," I said it's really easy in life to just be a butter knife, right? A butter knife that you can't
Yeah.
cut yourself. It's really safe, right? You can go through life really safe, and suddenly life goes by. Or you can choose to sharpen your sword and put that blade on to cut through life in the highest and greatest of ways. I said, you know, butter knife, good for butter and toast, but it's not going to cut through that roast. It's like, it's just, there's something so much bigger. And I think we can take the easy route. But I think to your journey and sharing that from your grandparents to, rest in peace, your grandparents and your mom and your dad. And, I don't know him really, but I mean, I got to hear him on the phone. Just sound like, man, let me go light that Harley up. Just, he just seemed like you said, that full
Hmm.
motorsports guy. But life is difficult. And I think that's why this is like, time to breathe is moments in life that add up to this big breath of air, right? I mean, it could be the starting line. We talked to Sean Hackley on the last one. He said, when you get on the starting line, you work so hard for something, you deserve to be there, and suddenly your adrenaline hits, and you just need to remind yourself to breathe, that you worked hard for this, that you belong here, right? Does that relate to you too? Because obviously the motocross, that starting line. And then I'm gonna take that one and segue with that into Dade City, because we got to hit Dade City hard, because that was a stomping ground of yours. When people talk about Tyler Livesay, they're like, "Dude, you have no idea, bro. We'd show up, and that guy was just like beer hot, just like so fast." So like
Yeah.
you would take that contingency many times, but starting on the line, that reminder to breathe. Life every day we wake up, it's not like it's just roses and pots of gold, right? Rainbows. It's like, dude, it's like you have to breathe and just embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah, the starting line is wild, dude. I know you felt it. I know a lot of people listening have felt it. But what other scenario in your life, and you can see this happening in real time if you watch Supercross, where you got so much adrenaline and stuff flowing through your body that you start twitching and moving around. Like that doesn't happen to normal people, right? Where you're like you're so nervous, you're so excited, you're so afraid, you're so happy, all of these emotions all at once that your body can't even sit still. Like you can go down the line and watch Supercross, and 20 of the 22 are going to be doing some weird stuff, right? You're looking at them like, well, they got Tourette's, or like what's going on? Which I think some of them actually do. Shout out to Vince Reese. Um, but it's like one of those things where it's like it's hard to experience that in your everyday life, and I think for riders that are, I think you should ride as long as you want to ride. If you want to ride till you're 80, I just had a guy in my camp that was 78 years old to feel that feeling, but you need something there that backs that up, right? And I think that that's one thing um, for me that I miss a little bit is that big rush of feelings. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
um, I don't know. I think it's pretty insane, and I think that it's very applicable to things in life. But I don't think there's anything that I found, and I've never really done drugs or anything like that. I would assume that's why a lot of guys can end up going down that path, and we've seen that before go sideways. Is that there's very few things that give you similar feelings to that starting line feeling. I think that's where the addiction starts to lie, and I think it could be such a positive thing if you can move through those emotions and have success after the gate drops, right? Because of how wild those feelings are, you know?
Yeah. I mean, 30, just for anyone that doesn't ride or that everyone should, I encourage to jump in a go-kart, jump in something and feel like a little bit of the G-force, a little bit of that speed. Cause it really, anything that gives you the chills means you're pushing something, you're getting outside of your comfort zone. But starting lines, 30 plus people pretty much funneling into a corner, everyone wanting to make it there. And we've seen some nasty crashes, but if you think about life, right? Jobs, careers, everyone going for the same job, everyone competing for something. It's like you're literally there with 30 people that think they deserve to win. And 30 people that think that they're going to get to that first turn. The mental, the physical, the mindset, I just think it's so crazy. So Day City though, I keep like literally I know there's like the local hometown heroes. I grew up and I could win at Carlsbad Raceway a lot easier than I could at other tracks, right? That was my hometown. But I
Yeah.
guess if we just go to Florida, let's do two-part, man. Like everyone always brings that up there, like how fast you were and how dominant you were. Like you said, the contingency, you could make 40, $50,000. But I don't know if I totally understand everything, but I know you used to sit out front of James Stewart's house. This is all in Florida. And you guys, you just wanted, you were a kid and you wanted to, who wouldn't want to get invited in and ride that track? Can you explain just that little nook of have fun with an exciting part of Date City, because that was a big part of your life. I mean, your race career. I mean, you excelled in so many ways. Now you're helping people of all levels. But it's like back then, Date City, and then somehow one of the greatest riders in the history, the Bubba Scrub. I mean, one of the funniest dudes. His podcast is amazing, and he's got the 7 Gear brand. The guy's just a. I mean, I've always looked up to him. I actually have a picture here of that I took of James when he was pretty little on a
Oh
on a good
yeah,
old Polar. So I mean, I've known
that's
James and
awesome.
Malcolm. Malcolm was even smaller. So talk to me, just give me that excitement of this little pocket of life between. I'm assuming some crosses over your connection to James and just back then and Dade City.
Yeah, dude. I ended up at James's house because of Dade City, and so I'll give you a little timeline there. Like I started racing Dade City, and I was racing for Randy Yoho, and the structure of that series was it was called the Sponsors Cup. So you had to ride for a sponsor, and this is how Randy basically got B riders to get paid. So it was a little bit like NASCAR, where the money, the purse, is technically supposed to be going to the sponsor, and then the sponsor can disperse it how they like, right? So that's how he had such big gates. Is that like RJ Hampshire was racing that, for example, as a B rider, and getting beat by yours truly, by the way, right? He clearly went on to do pretty cool things. I would say I did
Yeah.
too, but not the same. But so basically, I rode for Randy for a year, did pretty good. I think I got fourth in the series. Was kind of figuring it out, and I picked up a sponsor. And really, dude, if I'm gonna be honest with you, we grew up broke, and sponsors were always like such a far fetched thing for me, right? It's like I never really felt deserving of like a free bike or free gear or free anything. Like I remember getting like a few pairs of Scott goggles through sponsorhouse.com, and I literally thought that, like, dude, you should have seen me celebrating in the double wide that day. I mean, it was next up, you know what I mean? And so I finally got a bike sponsor, and his name was Garrett Watley, and the team was KWWD Racing, which is a mouthful. And he bought me like 3 or 4 450s, built them really sweet. He was a suspension guy. He owned a well drilling company, so he had money, and he funded this whole team. And they lived a mile from James. Garrett and Pup, his son, Cecil. He goes by Cecil now. We used to call him Pup, but now he's like an adult. He's 30 years old. He's a good buddy of mine. He wants to be called his real name now, but we'll go with Pup for this. And that's why I moved over with them and basically trained at their house, and they had a track down the hill, and we could hear James and Malcolm and them riding all the time. And Garrett drilled Big James as well. So that property that Kawasaki or Fox, one of those guys, bought for them, he drilled the wells out there. So he had a relationship with Big James. And we would go ride down the fence line and steal tires off the fence line, all these spec Dunlops that were like 3 pounds lighter than all the other tires. Because, James is going to ride it for 2 motos and then put it on the fence. And so we had like this stack, like 50 of James's tires, and I used to run them, and the knobbies would fly off in 2 rides. But, anyways, over time, I think when we got to a point, I don't know if it was Garrett that made the phone call or Pup was already riding there, but somehow we wiggled our way in there, right, to like go ride over there with those guys. And you got to think, this is at the height of James Stewart. This is right after, a perfect season outdoors on Kawasaki's, going into what I think was San Manuel Yamaha, where I do think he won a championship. So like he's driving the Lamborghini to the track every day. Like every day he would come in and ride with us. It was like a different exotic car, and we were all like, "What in the hell is going on here?" You know what I mean? Like this is it. I felt like I was living his life. Like I'm like, this is crazy. And coming from where I came from to being in that environment, it was almost like a shell shock. It was hard to even fathom what was going on. And and skipping to the track, like it was scary to go there too. The jumps are so big. I mean, they're huge, especially for back then. I feel like we're evolving in that direction where a lot of the tracks are getting bigger jumps. But dude, I was scared every time I went there. I could, how you jump a jump for the first time, you're like, oh, I got this dialed in, we're good. Every day it was a reset button to like, oh, I'm scared again. Like I'm scared to jump these jumps and do all this again. But we made it through, and then like going, and that really helped my Dade City too, right? Like I do think I became a better rider riding over there. Although some days when you're 10 seconds a lap slower than James, is a little disheartening to think that you have to be that speed to actually make a good living at this. And so some days it was a little discouraging, but overall, like racing Dade City, I won. I think I won that next year, and I got second overall to Mike Bacone the 2 years after that. Really close battles. Broken back in one of them, was winning the series. Both years was winning the series, and then got hurt and battled through the pain, and lost by a couple points. Super dramatic, right? But like go back to the first year that I won the championship at Dade City. I was like down. Basically, I had to win, and the guy that was leading the points had to get fourth place, right? So it was a little bit of a long shot, right? But I was just spot on that day. And this was like when Jason Thomas was racing, Kyle Keelan, Zach Osborne would come in every once in a while, Matt Bonney, Kyle Chisholm, like some pretty damn good riders. And it was a big gate that night, last race of the year. I have a perfect night going fastest qualifying. Holshide had won the first moto, Holshide the second moto, won that, and the guy literally got fourth place, and I won the championship on the last night. And it literally, dude, it was the greatest feeling that I've ever felt in my life. Like I'll never forget that moment. My dad was there. I even think my mom might have came down for that one, either that one or the day before or the weekend before. But she only watched me race like 2 or 3 times in my whole life, so that was a pretty big deal. But I remember he sent a plane with like an electronic sign, like "Congratulations, Tyler Livesay." On like this is what Randy O was doing. He literally had a plane fly over at night with like "Congratulations, Tyler Livesay, Sponsors Cup champion." And I'm like, dude, this is like Supercross. This is like better than Supercross. If we were getting paid like millions instead of thousands, it would have been like Supercross, And so that really inspired me to keep racing there. And then like my favorite sponsor that I ever got, you know who Anthony Paggio is, I'm sure. Basically, I think he's pretty high up at Oakley now, but at that time he was, doing all of the rider stuff, and James was an Oakley guy, and so he had kind of known about me. But he gave me an Oakley contract for winning that championship, and I got it at the awards banquet. So part of, you get your check, and then they're like, oh, we got something special for you, and it was Paggio comes up on stage and gives me an Oakley sponsorship, and I loved sunglasses at the time. Like, when I was 8 years old, I asked for Oakley sunglasses for like Christmas, birthday, everything. I thought they were the coolest thing in the whole world, right? And I'm pretty sure my dad got me fake ones, what I thought were real. They're like green with gold lenses, the gold O on the side, the real like, fast glass style. You know what I'm talking about? And I loved those things, dude. And so to get that moment with Paggio and that whole like kind of full circle moment at Dade City was pretty inspiring. So I worked my ass off to try to keep doing that. And I would say the top three guys like me, Picone, and Keelan was really fast. it would be hard for like even James at that time to say, I ain't going riding there. He's like, you guys are too fast there. I'm not going and getting embarrassed, which obviously he would have beat us, right? Like he would have been a little faster, but you know, it was known in that area that you're not going to come in and beat these guys. I don't care who you are, unless you're the James Stewart of the world. Even Chad Reed would come on a practice night and not be faster. And so we just had the track dialed in, the bike set up perfectly for it, and comfortable there. And, you know, they would change the track every week. So it was a different layout every week. You're not riding the same track, but it's the same soil. So it's really about knowing the soil and knowing how the berms and the ruts and the bumps develop. And then from there, you just freaking get after it.
Just the story of that, and like to win that race, to have the plane go by, but like all those fast kids. I spent so much time in Florida with Mini Warriors, with No Fear, with Alpine Stars, but super fast kids. But I always get stoked for you when I hear that story because I know how fast people were going at that race. And so the fact that you, I always get pumped, even though like, yeah, is it a Supercross title? No, but like the amount of, like you said, RJ Hampshires and just different riders that would come through there. So anyways, that was my selfish wanting to hear that story a little more. But what would you say now? Like you said, you shared so much. I guess you know. Actually, now I was gonna say, what we're gonna the perspective. You've gained so much perspective, but really, tell me. I want to just MX Factory. What I see from an outside, and I'm your boy. I haven't actually been to one because obviously I can't stay on two wheels not being there, so I need to get there and obviously have you help me out, brush off the dust. But you have a technical approach. You know, you take this more flat track kind of like thing, but it's really through all of this stuff to, you know, to going back to 2012, 13, 14, but even now 2024, the technique and the fun, because everyone's trying to ride safer. And I think you always tell me you have this mentality where it's like if you focus on your technique, not only does it help your corner speeds and all that, but it also helps your longevity in the sport. And when you love motocross, you don't want to ever be so injured. So if you can avoid injuries and you kind of combo all that into it. What's your secret sauce, man? Because you really like you pay attention. And I see when you golf, you pay attention, so you grow, but you're always evolving. And we talked about this too. You have skills now that literally, if you would have had back then, what you've learned that you could apply back when you were going fast, it would have changed everything. And that might have been kind of helping out that 10-second gap on Stewart's track. But what like
Mm-hmm.
MX Factory's on fire, man. People are leaving having fun. They're buying your merch. I mean, obviously, we've teamed up and partnered up and with Mended and developed gear the last year. But really, MX Factory, you've created something that's very highly respected, and people leave, and it's something that whatever age they are, they're going to tell their kids about. Man, I just want to say first and foremost, props. You know, I really want to do a school myself just to come out and go through it because I keep seeing the smiles and I see posts and all the people commenting that do your schools, but I want so badly to kind of hone in on my techniques, you know, but also people that have never ridden, just started riding, or that are pros. It applies to everybody. But dude, break it down because I'm blown away, and just huge props though. MX Factory is solid.
Thanks, man. You should come to, you know, I'm about to do a 4 camp run in Texas starting this weekend. So you could be there. I'll be there with a bike if you're trying to get in on that. But
Dang, now the
basically the
pressure's on.
methodology that, yeah, now the pressure's on. The methodology is like, I kind of just try to learn how the human brain learns the best. Then also taking into consideration the fear and anxiety that comes along with this a fear-driven sport. Like everyone says motocross is fun, but it's fearful first, right? It's typically like, I'm not sure. Oh, that was super fun. You know what I mean? Like it's like you got to move through the fear part to find the fun. And so I built my program one to help everyone understand the why. Why does this work? Why do we do this? Why is that rider doing that? And then second piece of that, it helped them to understand that they also can do what the pros are doing. The body positions and the techniques that the pros are doing are not rocket science. The difference is they're doing them going really fast, not thinking about them at all on the roughest and most difficult competition in the world. Right? The average rider isn't going to experience any of that. But that doesn't mean that they can't do what they're doing at slower speeds in a more tame environment. Right? the reason they're the best in the world is because they have the mental capacity to process all that information and make it subconscious thought so they can think about becoming really great racers or racecraft or setting up the rider in this corner. I always think it's really interesting and something that helps people understand how high level these guys are as far as thinking goes. Is, you can go around a 2.5 minute outdoor track. Let's just say Ken Roxon's winning, Jet Lawrence is behind him. Jet Lawrence shows his front wheel in turn 17, let's say, on the track. He goes inside, shows his front wheel. They're going to go that whole 2.5 minute lap, and they're going to come back to the corner. What's Ken going to do? He's going to move into that line, right? So he's thinking about, he's processing information and riding the bike next to perfect, but also considering what the other rider's doing to make sure that he's either putting time in between the two or covering the lines that were shown to be faster, all in real time, all while going as fast as possible, all while riding the bike on the edge of its capabilities, all while just like, being basically a superstar on a motorcycle. They're able to make these decisions and remember that. And so what I try to get people to understand is like, you have to become a thinker first, right? A thinker, a doer, and then just it has to happen subconsciously. And so I try to teach people how to think about what to do, right? And that usually comes from eliminating distractions, which is why we do a lot of flat ground drill work. When I call tracks and I say, hey, I need to rent a track, what I'm really saying is, hey, I need to rent a flat space at your property. And then I'm going to let the people ride on the track because they think it's fun, but that's not where we're going to really learn what we're doing because it's a distraction. And I want them to be the least amount of distracted and the least amount of fear in their bodies as possible because it opens up their brain to learn more. And I feel like that it works really well, like over time, it's like, okay, well, this makes sense. Like if I were to say, Malcolm, I don't know how good you are at trigonometry, but I want you to do the test before you get any study material. When we just go to do the test, you're going to get a 6% on the test, right? You've never seen the study material. You don't know what it is. And that's what racing is to a lot of people. They're doing the test before they went over the study material. And not only have they not went over the study material, they haven't done it in an environment where their body can actually absorb the material and they can learn it. And so that's a big part of the model that I run is like, hey, I'm giving you the study material and I'm teaching you the environment that you need to be in order to retain some of this. So when you go to the test, i.e. the race, you actually get the results you want. It doesn't work the other way around. You don't go to the race to learn. You go to the race to learn what you're doing wrong so you can go back to the study material and fix it. And, it's proven to work really well. And one thing that I am proud of that we do is that we're able to do it with the masses, right? Like you mentioned, we'll do 30, 35 rider camps of all different ages and skill level, and everyone's understanding and moving in the same direction. And that's the hard part, right? You can do it. Anybody can do a private lesson with someone and help them understand. But if you can do it with 35 people as one coach and everyone's moving in the right direction, you have yourself a product, and that's kind of how when I evaluate my riders at the end of the day, I'm like, how many of this group, did 95% of this group move forward? That's kind of a win. Did 100% of this group move forward? We did our job. You know what I mean? And it is difficult when you have a 6-year-old in there and then you have a 78-year-old in there. The 78-year-old can retain some information. Their brains are trained. They can think, but the body's not as good, right? So we have hiccups with the body. We can't turn our toes in. We can't stand with a flat back. We can't do these things. The 6-year-old's the opposite. The body's perfect. The brain isn't developed yet. And so, it's one of those things where I feel like our program that we take around the country and the world is the best possible to reach everyone in the group and make forward progress. And so, and I really like that's, I'm not any special human being. I just think the product is good. And I go there to teach them and for them to have fun. So I joke around with them and I try to have some personality with them. And I try not to talk down to them like I know it and you don't, because that's not very fun either. And when someone's teaching me something, I want to feel like I'm there learning it with them, not like getting talked down to like, you don't know, if you don't do it this way, you're never going to learn it. It's more so like, hey, this is the path that worked really well for me. I think you guys should try it this way and give me some feedback. If you don't feel it, let me see if I can get in your brain a little bit and help you out. And so, and I enjoy that. Like it's fun for me, and it fills a little bit of that starting gate void that I don't get anymore.
Yeah, it is. It is crazy just trying to fill those voids. I don't know if I've become so comfortable that like You know, like I love the competitiveness, but I also am very humble to myself if I haven't gone and done the work or been practicing at that craft. Like if I went golfing with you, not that I ever got to your level, but or motocross or anything or mountain biking, which you always school me on, but you're also very helpful and show me techniques and just I get to follow you and it helps a ton. But if you don't practice something, you can't be so hard on yourself when you don't win because sometimes we have such a competitive edge, you know. But I love how you said between 6 and 78. I mean, the 78-year-old needs to probably unpack some techniques he learned to learn some correct ones. And the young kid probably is a little more pliable. You can kind of bend him, right? A little bit more. And he can kind of go, oh, like, you know, I know Nolan Cobb, you know, with racing, riding, Revin, Chris and Tina and all them, and Julia and Brian, the whole family. But it's like I know you spent close friends with them as well. They're out in Florida. We're all working together, MX Factory, Mended team. But you were saying that you're giving props to Nolan Cobb, young kid. Was he 9? He's 10. He'll be 11 pretty soon.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's such a big gap between 78, 70, 60, and it's like life. Sometimes we have to unpack things that we learned and unlearn them to kind of properly get back something, or else we're just going to keep getting in our own way, or having similar
Hmm.
injuries, or not be able to hit the corner as fast, or not be able to move forward. So I think your technique and what you're doing, it's funny how this stuff applies to life too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's all the same, right? We're all just trying to figure something out. And I think that we
Yeah.
listen to the people that we connect with the most. You know, like for instance, AJ Catanzaro, the Moto Academy. Great. All good. People are going to go to him because they connect with him more. People are going to come to me because they connect with me more. We have a pretty similar program. It's like who do you feel the most comfortable around? And who do you feel like can teach your personality the best? Right? And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
No one's losing here. We're just connecting with different people, and the more people that we can connect with, the better for the sport overall. You know, and so I think it's just important to understand that, and that way you don't get in competition with other people as much with that mindset where it's like, no, no, we're all here for the right person. We're all here for a person. We're all here for a group of people that really jive with us and connect with us, and and those people show up. I always say the right people show up, and
Yeah.
sometimes the wrong people show up, and then you've got to evaluate what you're putting out into the world to find that mirror, right? Because they'll show up too, or like they'll provoke you, or they'll trigger you, and they're triggering a part of you that you attracted. And I'm a firm believer in that too. And I start having scenarios happen in my life where I don't like the people around me. I'm like, well, what am I putting out into the world to attract this? I think that's important for people to understand too. Is that it's usually you.
No, I'm with you.
You
Let's
the
let's do
famous
your
the
vibe.
famous Malcolm quote. The famous Malcolm quote. Let me hit it. If you think you might be the problem, you probably are.
Hey, bud, that thing helps me every morning to like literally keep sharpening and recognizing I don't want to hit the same obstacles and just keep falling over, right? So I just encourage that so much because I think that's my fun way of saying like, man, are you walking in and pointing at everyone? You know, are you can oh well this rider has this or this person has it, or are you slowly kind of figuring out the life you want to live and going after that, right? And I mean, it helps I mean, as a parent, we're both parents. I mean, my daughter's 7, Lincoln five, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
5.
5.
And yeah, and so just being parents. I mean, you and I being parents now, it's like it's crazy to see what our parents and respect what they went through. Not everyone's equipped. There's so much life and everything becomes unselfish about your kid. You know, like I guess I'd have to ask because I mean we talk about this all the time. It's the biggest blessing in the world and it's the most emotional blessing in the world, right? But being a dad, like how much has that shifted and changed your outlook on everything?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit. I think it forces you to dig a little deeper, especially if you really want what's best for your kid. I'm always back and forth again. It's like I don't know a lot, like I'm always reminded as a dad, I was like, oh, you don't know that much. You're doing pretty good, but you still don't know that much because something will pop up and it's not what you thought it was going to be. But what I will say, something that being a dad has forced me to do is just understand myself a little bit more and be a little more patient and think before I speak, especially in front of kids. It's like because they're such a sponge. Like my son will just like repeat things like he'll repeat even the funny things that I say exactly how I say them, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, what do you like? Where did you learn that? And he'll be like, I don't know. So he don't even know where he's getting it from. It's just like they're a sponge and they're repeating everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And then the relationships that come along with them, like, dude, it's been a really, I mean, I'm a single dad, right? We're separated from his mom, and you know a lot of this, but to the people out there, that's a journey in itself. That's super humbling and very hard, right? It's one of those things where, you know, people maybe people don't know this about me because I don't put it out in the world that much, but it's been a struggle to be a single dad. It's been a struggle to co-parent with you know the person that you were once thought you should have kids with, right? And it doesn't work out for whatever reason. Most of the time, if you think you could be the problem, you probably are, right? And so, um, you know that piece has been extremely. It's been just a huge lesson, right? Of just constant, almost every day, like have patience, try to be a good human, try not to react, try to do what's best for your child, and keep learning what that is. Because sometimes we think we know what's best, and a lot of times we don't know. And so that's been a challenge, but also like my son gets 2 Christmases, he gets 2 birthdays, he gets two parents that are like really trying to be the good parent. And I think that, you know, I think that he wins in that regard. You know, my parents were separated. I'm just trying not to do it like they did it, where there wasn't a lot of, it didn't feel like a lot of love all the time. It felt like a little bit of a chore sometimes. And I don't think that Lincoln feels that. And I think you could even attest to that when you're around him. He's a happy kid, and he's not heavily affected by our chaos, right? Like it's hard as adults to get along sometimes, especially when you have different opinions on what should be right for your child. That's a big one. Like you think you can get
Mhm.
along with someone until you disagree with what's going on with the one thing that you love the most, and you find out someone's real true colors. Then you know, and so, and no disrespect to his mom, I think she's doing the best that she can with what she knows too, and we're all we're all fighting for the for the good of our child, you know.
No, I love that. I mean, I guess respect to you. I mean, respect to Lincoln. Let's just start. Lincoln's such a good kid. He's such an amazing, so funny, little smile, good looking little kid. Just so much fun to be around. But you just unselfishly, you want to look at parents, and when it does happen, and when there is separation, and parents go their separate ways. The biggest thing I try to encourage is, man, it's a little kid or it's kids. It's a family. It's like you really just gotta take yourself out of it and take your differences out. And I think just the kids, man, it's just these little beautiful souls, and just you just want to encourage and hopefully see people do the right thing, not necessarily because of like emotions, egos, or to get back or to have regret, walk through it, but try to just look at the kids. But I think you guys are doing a great job, and like I said, love nothing more than hanging out with you. Let me go into some fun little quick rapid fire. So 60s, 70s favorite motocross rider.
Was Wardy before that, or was Wardy after that? Was he 80s?
He was probably
Probably
he's
gonna
probably
have to be
80s.
DeCoster. Probably gonna
DeCoster
have to be
legend.
like DeCoster. Yeah,
Okay,
mainly
now
because I
now
don't
we'll
know
hit your.
that many.
No, no, that's fine. It's like, I mean, I,
Go
I
ahead.
think there have been like Bob Hurricane Hannah. There might have been a few, like once again,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't have a ton of the names. Actually, I should, but so let's go now. Let's go like 80s, 90s.
it's gotta be probably McGrath if you're gonna talk about 90s. If you're gonna talk
Yeah,
about 80s, I would probably go with like Johnny O was pretty stylish.
Johnny O was fire. What about? I guess we'll do late 90s, early 2000.
Wasn't James early 2000?
Yeah,
Wasn't he like
James Reed,
03?
James Reed,
Yeah, James,
Carmichael, and then
Ricky, Reed, dude, that era right there, that was like something I don't think we're ever going to see before because I think the sport's going to be forever close like it is now, right? Like, but those guys were so much better than everyone else, and no disrespect to like the Andrew Shorts of the world or the Tim Ferrys or whatever, but it'd be like 5 second gap between third and fourth, like in qualifying. I'm sure you remember that. It's like, holy crap, how are they
yeah.
that much better? Yeah, those guys were insane.
Now let's go kind of early 2000s, which is like the Villapoto Dungies kind of mix. Stewart was still there's a few still in there. Chad Reed obviously just legend. Kind of was in the mix for longer than I guess right. James and some of them kind of slowed down a little bit. And he kept going, but
Yeah, that's my era right there. That was me, 2008. Um, I would go with Dungy for the pure like respect of just being the freaking diesel engine, and staying healthy and he was like an OG technique guy. I would go with Jason Lawrence for pure entertainment and just like watching someone unravel, but also at the same time being like an insanely talented person on a dirt bike.
Now we'll jump in today, baby. Today's motocross. There's a lot of spice going out there. You don't have to pick one person, but what are you getting most fired up about on today's
I give you
in,
one person. I give you every weekend. I got one person in my heart that I really want to win, and it's Kenny. I love Kenny.
ah
I think he's just like a great example of a family guy just out in a different country grinding. He's been through like the most horrible injuries ever. He seems happy to be there. I was just talking to a friend that's a photographer for Feld the other day. He's like, man, he's like, a lot of the people just don't seem like they're happy to be there. But Kenny always seems like he's happy to be there, and I think he's a great example of like what people, kids want to be a pro one day. He's done it right on all fronts. He's made a ton of money. He's had smart people behind him. He's had the cool sponsors. He's won the races, and he's a good-looking dude, in great shape, has a good family. He eats the same as me, which is a plus. Yeah, Kenny's my guy, dude.
okay. Well, Tyler, I love you, bud. The crazy thing is I get to probably see you in a little bit and not even be distant like this, but this is so much fun. I think it's brought so much value to so many. The MX Factory. They could find you out there. Tyler Livesay, Livesay. I used to say Livesay, but I kind of like that because it was live to say. Go after your
Yeah.
dreams and let your actions speak. But man, big love you as a friend. Love you as watching your values as a father, as a racer, with your school, with your ethics, with motorsports. You inspire me to ride mountain bikes, to ride dirt bikes, and I thank you. This podcast is called Time to Breathe. Time to breathe. What does time to breathe mean to you?
Oh, I think it's basically everything we talked about wrapped up in one quiet moment. We talked about a lot of chaos and a lot of I won't say a lot of chaos, but we talked about a lot of action. And I think without breathing, you have no action. Without breathing, you have no love. Without breathing, you have no nothing. And that's what it is to me. Is not literally my son was. And this is not to go off on another tangent. My son was sick last week, right? He was waking up in the middle of the night and holding his breath, right? And it would keep him awake and make him more upset. He would cry a little bit and hold his breath. And all I had to tell him was like, dude, give me 10 deep breaths. And he would be asleep by number 8. It's like a human being, kids can't hide it. When they struggle, they struggle. They let you know. It's like,
Yeah.
give me 10 deep breaths. I'm out. I'm done. And I think that if we could all put that into our program where it's like, hey, when it's going crazy, give me 10 deep breaths and let's see how we feel on number 8, 9, 10. And I think that I really respect the fact that you're putting that out into the world and subtly reminding people that that's the way.
Thanks, brother. Well, on that note, I think it is time to breathe. Probably take a little breaker from this awesome pod. But thank you, love you, dude. I will see you soon. I know we're going to Supercross, which will be fun and hanging out. But appreciate you, love you. Thanks for jumping on in your awesome new Sprinter van. So I can't wait to see the MX
Yeah.
Factory and Mended, which you're so kindly putting a logo on there as part of the family. So that's it, dude. Love you,
Yeah.
buddy. Thank
Quick
you so
shout
much.
out to mendedmx.com. Buy the gear. I'm going to do the shout out. Can I do the shout out?
Oh yeah,
Sickest
let's
gear
go.
in the
Shout out.
game. Yeah, yeah. Just shot some super sweet videos from an upcoming line that we're dropping. Get some gear. You can even get 10% off MXF 10, right? That's how we get 10% off. MXF
Mm-hmm.
10 from the MX Factory. Love you guys. Appreciate you, Malcolm. I appreciate the friendship more than anything. And we'll see you soon.
Love you back, buddy. Every time I keep jumping on with some of the most amazing human beings, Time to Breathe just opens up my passion, my heart for helping people, but also getting so much good advice, so many life lessons. And Tyler Livesay is not only just a close friend, someone I respect in so many ways, dad, um, one of the top technical coaches in motocross, just funny guy all around, eats healthy too. He's trying to teach me my ways. I better step it up. Mountain biking, golf, the whole nine. We live in Austin. I enjoy this guy, and I wanted to open up more of the joy and value I get in being his friend, and just from racing and a career growing up all over, to that. So I thoroughly enjoyed this. There's so many values across this thing. You could check out this on Time to Breathe Pod across almost all platforms. But Tyler Livesay, I look at legends as legends, and I look at people that I believe in, and anyone that ever comes on this is someone that I see something so great in, and I get value from. So it'd be selfish if I didn't do this. So thanks to Tyler Livesay, the MX Factory, and that is a wrap. Time to Breathe Pod. I love you guys. We out.